Welcome inside Black and Gold, and we have just completed the first training camp practice. It's in the books. It's good to be out there after a much extended break. It felt like to get back to Saints football. I know Jeff and I have a ton of observations to talk about from the first unpadded practice. There's still a lot of going on with the additions. It was great to see 100% participation. And then we'll even close the things out with our thoughts on number 80. He's back. Jimmy Graham back in the saddle for the Black and Gold. Jeff, I thought we had a pretty tame day weather-wise out there. At least it was didn't seem like a Louisiana summer day, and I'm not complaining at all.
Teddy Graham?
Teddy Graham.
Trying to think of a Graham nickname. But yes, Jimmy Graham was out there. The Saints were out there. It was not crazy hot. It was only like 92 degrees, reasonable humidity. Sure. I fully expect that to change. This was one of the shorter practices. DA talked about that. It was about 90 minutes. Tomorrow, I think, is going to be about an hour 45. They're going to work their way up to the 2-hour practices. So we're going to get into what we saw out there. There was only 2 sets of team drills. And just generally speaking, not a ton of action. And that's not a surprise. The first day, there's a lot of work to be done. The way DA phrased it is there is no light at the end of the tunnel right now, which feels kind of bleak.
Just darkness.
But I guess that's fair, right? This is like very much, okay, this is going to be a grind. You're in for the long haul. You don't have to get everything done today. But as they say, and as the cliche goes, get 1% better every day. That's what they all say. It's stupid. It makes no sense because if you got 1% better every day, then eventually you would reach 100 and you wouldn't have to continue to get better. Anyway, we'll move on. This is not a loading bar. This is I don't know, call it what you want. But the first observation that I'll make, and that's how we're going to do this, we're going to go through observations this first segment, as you said, then Pete Werner, then some Graham notes. But the first observation, as you mentioned, for once, knock on wood, health seems to be on the Saints' side to start. No one missed today's practice. The only player who was not a participant in at least position drills was Andy Johnson, who did work off to the side with trainers. He's still on the physically unable to perform list, but everyone else got working. We saw Cesar Ruiz. We saw Nick Saldiveri. We saw Trevor Penning. We saw Shaq Davis. We saw Kendra Miller. Everyone was out there. For now, you're seeing Andres Pete, Calvin Throckmorton, Trey Turner, and James Hurst kind of split up those reps. James Hurst started at guard, then moved over to tackle. But, I think that offensive line group is going to be kind of interesting. You saw Max Rivera, the Saints signed him to be a center, which is interesting. He's going to be depth at center, and you're going to go from there. But all in all, it's very nice to not constantly, even if you're taking attendance and you're pretty sure you're just going to cross every single name off. And that's just nice to see. You see a lot of teams around the NFL dealing with injuries, dealing with holdouts, dealing with whatever. The Saints are not. All they're worried about is what is happening on the field.
Yeah, that was a really big bonus. I can't remember the last time everybody was there present. Like you said, there might not be 100% health currently, but having all the bodies in the building, a huge positive, obviously, for this team to get on the same page. And just seeing finally someone like even a Kendra Miller, who we hadn't seen really much from at all on the field today, big plus for me. And just looking forward now really to stacking these days together, getting that day off on Sunday, and we'll get back to Monday, and that's when the pads are on, and we'll really start, feeling these practices even more because, it was just a little light in the tush today, if you know what I mean.
Light in the tush.
Yeah,
that is one that I have not heard, but I guess I can get on board with it. Well, a guy who was not light in the tush. So, I don't know. I'm not a fan of what I just said. But it's Michael Thomas, who was a full go, which is very cool to see. And while it doesn't sound monumental, this is a guy who has played in 10 games since to start the 2019 season. He got a little tongue-tied there. He didn't show up at all in the 2021 season. He obviously was hurt the entire way. Last year, all throughout camp, it was like, okay, it's a ramp up. It's this, it's that. When is he going to be ready? Now it's a hamstring. Now it's a foot, blah, blah, blah. throughout training, throughout OTAs and mini camp. It was like, when's he going to be available? Are we going to see him then? Are we going to see him then? He was a full go today. There were no limitations. He was in every drill. He got targeted twice by Derek Carr. Paulson Adebo broke one up, made a nice play. Then the second one, he got completely toasted by Mike Thomas. We talked about this a little bit. Paulson Adebo is a guy who likes to be physical. You're not going to out-physical Mike Thomas.
Right.
That's the worst possible matchup Paulson Adebo could have. If he ever comes up against Mike Thomas in the he's going to have a hard time. It's going to be a long day for him. But Mike looks good. He looks quick. And I asked DA today, how much of a boost is that just to see Mike out there? And he didn't give what I would consider to be a fantastic answer, but I did think that his answer was interesting. And here you go.
Well, I think the boost is that we had everybody available at least for some portion of practice today. I think that's a step in the right direction. Certainly, I don't think anybody's made light of how important we think Mike Thomas is to our football team and what we think he can bring to our football team. I know Mike's been working extremely hard to get himself ready. I thought he looked pretty good out there in what I was able to see. So, I think that's it's a really positive step.
And it is. Like, it really is. And, I've said this a few times. You're not really going to you're not really going to be able to answer any serious questions about how effective Mike Thomas is going to be this season until you see him play in 4 or 5 games in a row. Because that's the question that we didn't get an answer for last year. We saw him in 2 games, got hurt in the 3rd, never came back. And so he could be healthy all throughout camp, and you're still going to be wondering, can he make it through a full NFL season? But the longer you can get him on the field and get him feeling good and not be constantly looking over your shoulder waiting for something to pop is a good thing. Both confidence-wise for the team, confidence-wise for Derek Carr, confidence-wise for Michael Thomas. And so, it's just cool to see him out there. This team is a different animal when Michael Thomas is healthy and he's healthy. And I think everyone, whether DA wants to admit it or not, everyone is more confident when he's out there.
Absolutely. Just, you talk about being the alpha male or whatever it is. Mike doesn't even have to say anything. It's its presence. Like you pointed out, it's just him being there seems to elevate everyone. I guess their whole being on offense. We know this team struggled last year with contested catches. Actually, just moving the ball in general, getting those first downs. Mike's a guy that's going to help you out in so much and help everybody else around him just because of his presence. Obviously, excited to see more of that match. Chris Olave maturing, learning more from Mike. What's Shaheed going to end up, gaining from him as well? But even we got some pretty good two contested catches guys in that same locker room now with Thomas and Jimmy Graham. It's going to be see like who can muscle someone for a football. I think I'd still go with Mike right now just because he's younger.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about Jimmy Graham in the last segment, but I do think, when you look at what could his role be, and I think he's still 6'7". He can still box a guy out. I was talking to Sean Fazend about this. He was like, I don't think he's going to be a guy who's going to be catching goal line fades. And I'm like, sure, but he's still 6'7". He can still be a big body and stand in front of somebody and just have that gigantic wingspan of a heron. And, it's like you're not getting around him. You can just stand on the goal line. And I think that's kind of what he's going to be. And Mike Thomas has always been really good at that. And I think, to an extent, it might be some Mike insurance where if you do lose him and you still need that red zone threat, we've talked about this. He wasn't successful in Chicago. Jimmy Graham was. He still caught 11 touchdowns. So we'll get into more of that. But, I think I do need to clean something up. I think I called him Max Rivera. I think I confused him with Ron Rivera, who used to be the head coach in Washington. Max Garcia is the player the Saints brought in. And the way Dennis Allen phrased it is, they lost Billy Price. And I think my instinct was they brought in Billy Price to be that center depth. And then they lost him. And so I kind of look at who is it going to be? Alex Pihlstrom? Is it going to be the UDFA out of Illinois? No, it's probably going to be Max Garcia. And this is what DA had to say about him. He was signed yesterday along with Trey Turner and
I think that's the plan, is to work him in at center. That was a position that I felt like we were a little bit light at, especially with the loss of Billy Price. So we worked him out. I know he's played some guard. He's played some center before. And so he had a good workout, and he was the guy we thought could add something to us.
And how that offensive line develops, you have some real names there now. You have Trevor Penning and Cesar Ruiz, and you feel like you want to see something from them. But Trey Turner isn't a slouch at guard, right? He's a 5-time Pro Bowler. He started basically everywhere he has gone. He's not going to just kind of roll over and say, here you go, Caesar, here you go on, just take the job. They're going to have to beat him out for it. And I think adding some competition there is only going to be good for that group.
No, and the addition of Turner was really immense for me, just because, we've seen so many injuries happen across this offensive line. There's still questions even going into this season with guys recovering, although it was, we noted obviously with the attendance, everybody out there and practicing, it was good to see Ruiz and Trevor Penning back on schedule for day one with this squad. But yeah, Trey Turner is awesome insurance and a guy that's coming home. So I look at it as another way. It's like that rejuvenation, that rebirth for someone else on this team, where, coming back home kind of relights that fire under him. And he's reunited with another St. Augustine LSU dude, with Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah, we talked to Trey today, and he wouldn't really get it. Like he's not a very excitable guy, right? Like he's very much like, the work is there, I'm going to do the work and blah, blah, blah. He wasn't willing to really go into like, oh, it's fantastic being home. And, to me, it kind of indicates he's not just signing here as a homecoming. He's signing here because he sees opportunity.
Yeah,
right.
And I think there were plenty of reports of other teams being interested in him. Thankfully, he wanted to come back to New Orleans.
Right. And that kind of just goes to my point. He's not here to be to just kind of walk into a backup job. He's here to contribute. And, I think that's a good, just to switch over to the defensive side of the ball for a bit. It's, the defense really doesn't get to show a lot in unpadded practices, especially with no shells, right? It's very much finesse work. But one thing we did see today, 2 balls got punched out. Troy Pride got one on Kirk Merritt, which, just a kind of a note in passing, Kirk Merritt stuck with the running backs. And I thought he might switch back to wide receiver now that you've got, Benjamin and Kendra Miller back and you have a full allotment of running backs. No, he's stuck at running back. So to me, he's listed at wide receiver, but until I see him at wide receiver, I'm just going to put in that running back group because he's sticking there. But he's the guy who he pulled off a nice spin, but then had the ball punched out by Troy Pride. And while it was late in the play, it was still like, hold on to the ball, dude. And he ended up recovering it, but that's because 2 guys ran into each other. It's going to be a play that gets noticed. And if you're Kirk Merritt, you're trying to make this squad, you can't be fumbling the ball. On the flip side, this is a Saints defense that did not force any turnovers last year. I mean, that's a bit hyperbolic, but they barely forced any. They did not punch the ball out. We saw it happen twice today. The play of the day, in my opinion, was Andrew Dowell coming across. Juwan Johnson caught a pass from Jake Haener, and he knocked it out. And this happened very much in the flow of the play, where you can say, yes, that was not late. That was where Juwan Johnson should be still securing the ball. He then picked it up and ran with it. It's good to see that instinct, because I just don't feel like they had enough of it. You just go for turnovers. You need them. They change games. Just getting that tackle, great. Bring him to the ground. But in the process, you have to be focused on trying to get that ball out. And day one, you saw it. So that's a good thing.
That was definitely a huge positive for me too, just because, like you mentioned, the takeaways just weren't coming last year. There were some instances, obviously penalties took a few away. The ball bounced the wrong way for the Saints, kind of thing. But it was just, in general, they weren't that ball hungry, turnover hungry defense from last season that they were in the past. But which is crazy, because they were still really productive as a unit, but at turnovers and also in the run game, this defense really had problems.
Very much so. And here's what DA had to say about the takeaways versus the turnovers, which it's a double-edged sword when you're playing against yourself, right?
My thoughts are we need to take the ball away more. Look, I thought we started, good today, and we had a couple of punch outs. It's interesting because when you go out there to practice, you're looking at both sides as the head coach, and on one side we punch the ball out and you're excited that we're punching the ball out, but yeah, we got to do a better job of protecting the ball this year too. And so there'll be a little bit of give and take, but obviously we got to do a better job overall as a team in that area, turnover takeaway margin.
And yeah, I mean, that's very true. I also think that, it's the first kind of statement. Like, I've talked a lot about this. Someone's got to step up at linebacker. Someone's got to put themselves in position to be that depth linebacker. And why not Andrew Dowell, right? Like, I don't think he is at the top of the mind of a lot of people when it comes to that depth linebacker spot, but he's a guy who has consistently flashed throughout camp in every year he's been on the Saints roster. He comes to play. He's always playing hard. He might not have the physical traits that you look for, stereotypically, but I think that, he's a guy who shouldn't be ignored in that battle.
Yeah, just really excited to see more from Andrew Dowell just because he's excelled on special teams for this Saints team. And it'd be nice to see if he can get into that linebacker rotation flow. We know we've talked about it a ton with after Demario Davis, after Pete Werner, then what? DeMarco Jackson, we've talked and hyped up a lot. Hopefully we get to see something from him this season. Obviously last year was a wash for him. But with looking at the linebacker spot for me too, Dowell, someone I'm hopeful for because, like I said, special teams have always been a strong point for him so far. Let's see if he can contribute more to this, the defensive unit flow and get himself involved.
Yeah, and if Peyton Turner, if Andrew Dowell can be that guy, then he's going to make the roster either way. That's the thing with Andrew Dowell. Kind of like Dwayne Washington, you looked at a guy who's not on the roster anymore. It's like he's got to make the roster. Could he possibly just contribute at running back to help you save a roster spot and maybe keep someone somewhere else? I don't know. Maybe that's something you can do. But either way, I think that's going to be an interesting numbers game. We're going to have a lot of time to really go through a lot of this. One funny thing that happened today was DA got challenged by Marshawn Lattimore to run gassers with him, and he kind of joked that he was asked whether he beat Marshawn. He said no, and because that would be a problem if he outran Marshawn at this point. But he did beat some of the linemen.
And it did seem like he was talking a lot of trash to Marshawn while he was running.
Well, I'm sure because I don't think Marshawn expected him to do it. And so he's like, okay, bet. But a lot of the coaches did, I think. And I was just on a podcast. I was on the Pick Six podcast with Ryan Wilson at CBS Sports. And we were talking about just basically because he brought that up. And I do think it's just an indicator of I think this team is very loose right now. I think they're a lot more comfortable this time this year than they were last year. Because there was a lot of questions last year. How is Jameis going to come back? Is this really Dennis Allen's team? What does the Pete Carmichael offense look like? Is it just a placeholder and you get Teron Payton back? What is this? This year, the staff is a lot more formed in DA's image. You have a quarterback that DA is a lot more comfortable with. It feels like a team that is built to win with the team that is here, not the coach that is doing what he wants, right? And you look at it and you just see a lot more confidence out of the plays on the field. You feel a lot more comfortable with everything. Derek Carr just has a presence about him that you appreciate. There was one moment today that Rashid, they were going through drills and Rashid Shaheed ran a route. Derek Carr didn't like how he ran it. So he just called him over. He said, no, run it this way. Went back to the line, ran it and threw it again. It's just that's the type of stuff that you like to see. You want to see this team coming together and being cohesive. I think it just seems that way. I don't know. Maybe I'm imagining it, but it's hard not to look at this team and feel like they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, to me, the whole, seeing Dennis Allen and coaches taking part in running sprints with players can only be great for team building. And, you said something, is this Dennis Allen's team? Does that question still need to be answered? And for me, last season, I thought that game in Cleveland where they could have totally just quit on the season, not even showed up to play that game in the freezing below zero temperature weathers. That showed a lot to me that they're not just showing up to games and putting on a C performance. These guys are going out there and giving it their all for Allen. And I really thought I felt that in that Cleveland game. And to me, just seeing that camaraderie and that bond even more now in training camp definitely made me smile. And I think, yeah, that's only positive stuff for this squad.
Yeah, I think it's easy to overlook chemistry when you're kind of looking at a team and you're looking at all the faces and the skill sets and everything. And okay, how good is the quarterback? How good are the running backs? Like playing well together is a lot of time more important than the individual quality of the parts that you're looking at. And I think you're absolutely correct. That team last year could have phoned it in, much like they did in Week 18. They could have done that much earlier in the season, right? Like no one would have blamed them going out to Cleveland and laying an egg in the freezing cold, and instead they won that game. No one could have blamed them for going out to Philly and losing to the eventual NFC champions. They won that game. And I've said all along, you may not like Dennis Allen. I know a lot of people aren't huge fans of Dennis Allen, and I get it. He's kind of boring. He's robotic, whatever. The team in there cares about Dennis Allen. They like Dennis Allen. It stuns some people to hear this. The team plays hard for Dennis Allen, and
absolutely
last year just didn't go well. I think they were a lot closer than a lot of people would like to believe, and the way things started today, you feel confident. And I'm not trying to just blow smoke here. We'll have plenty of time to complain and plenty of time for everything to go sideways. But today, getting into the flow of things, ramping up, as Dennis Allen likes to say, I'm excited about it. I don't know if I've been this excited about the Saints since Breeze was here.
That's fair. I mean, last season there was, that hopeful optimism. I don't know what you want to say, but I don't know if anyone really believed that team could be a contender, even when it was Jameis leading the way, and certainly when Dalton came in. I don't think anyone thought that this team was going to amount to much, and they still made a push to do it. I give them that much of a credit that it was down to the wire. Yeah, they weren't able to pull it off, and hopefully that toughens these guys up even more for this season. I don't know.
I agree, and I'm looking forward to keep watching it. I had a lot of fun out there today. I'm gonna have a lot of fun the rest of the week. I'm looking forward to seeing all the fans on Friday. I always say, like, the practice is different when the fans are there. Like, the players clearly just get into it, and I understand why. It's exciting. They love playing in front of fans. That's why they do it.
It was good to hear. There was a lot of vocal coaching out there too. I don't know. The acoustics seemed to be extra good today. I was hearing a lot of back and forth between coaches and players, and just that kind of, I don't want to say anger, but that aggression. You need that in football, and it was just really welcome.
But all right, let's wrap up that segment. We're going to come back, and I want to talk more about Jimmy Graham and really the tight end position in general, because we also got a chance to talk to Taysom Hill today, and I thought he had some interesting things to say, both about Jimmy Graham and about his role, which I don't even know why. Like, I asked him if he considers himself a tight end. He was like, eh. So we're gonna get into that. This is Inside Black and Gold. I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. You can follow him at Steve Geller WWL. You can follow the show on Twitter at Saints_pod. I'm posting a lot more camp videos to the show Twitter account because Elon Musk doesn't get my Twitter account anymore. I have to take something for me. So we're trying to build that account. So check that out. We're going to continue to post there, and obviously follow us on YouTube. Hit the like button at WWL Sports, and we'll be right back on Inside Black and Gold.
Don't go away.
And we're back. One more segment breaking down the first day of New Orleans Saints training camp. And I feel like waking up this morning was like, like Christmas morning. I was just so excited. I woke up early. I woke up at 6. I normally wake up at like 7, and I walked the dog this morning. I woke up at 6, and I was like, I was so pumped. And then I got back from walking the dog, and I was ready to go. And I was like, wait, I have like an hour. I don't even have to be ready yet. I ended up watching the final episode of Secret Invasion, which was kind of terrible, I have to admit.
Oh no, I haven't gotten into it yet.
It's all right. But like, I was so amped up that I was like ready. I was sitting on the couch, like, I guess I'll go get a coffee or something.
Well, that's why you got a prime parking spot today too.
I did. I didn't have to park in like the satellite lot. Yeah. And so I'm Jeff Nowak. He's Steve Geller. This is Inside Black and Gold. I have to give a shout out to Nick Underhill, who's more bold than I am about moving cones out of the way, because he was able to find me a spot today, getting into the parking lot, which is a lot easier to do when there's no fans there, because they like
Definitely.
to save some VIP spots when the fans are there. But so the big news that we haven't gotten to talk about on the podcast yet, really, the Saints brought back Jimmy Graham, and I think I was not alone in that initial news breaking and thinking, oh, they're just bringing him back so he can retire as Saint, right? Like that's the deal. You sign that 1-day contract, and you're gonna. And no, very much no. This is a guy who they had considered bringing back multiple times, never worked out. This year, it did. And Jimmy Graham is on a 1-year deal coming back for the New Orleans Saints. And I was talking to Sean Vizend about this. I don't think you would have gotten Jimmy Graham to agree to come back without some kind of, not necessarily a guarantee you make the roster, but assurance that you're going to give him a realistic role to play into, right? This is not a vanity project. He's not coming back unless he thinks he can make this roster and expects to play in games in the Superdome, which is what he promised fans they would see. I don't think he means preseason games. So, Jimmy still 6'7", still can move. I'm excited to see what he looks like when the pads come up.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, this is one I didn't expect or see coming, honestly, either.
Oh,
You mentioned, the signing, and I was like, oh, cool. The 1-day deal to come back and retire as saying, that's not the case. That man's coming to play. And what a turnaround for this group in general, because I know initially after last season, it was like, what are we going to do here? This was, before even like the signing of a Foster Moreau was brought in. And then, there was, okay, you see a little bit of depth there. They added even, Jesse James, now a Jimmy Graham to that group. Suddenly we're bursting with tight ends here. And I didn't even mention, obviously, the young guy in Lucas Kroll and the man.
nice catch today for him.
The man who's not even sure if he's a tight end himself in Taysom Hill. I thought that was great today, that little back and forth.
Yeah. So, like just to follow up on that point, Jimmy Graham, I think I look at him similar to when they brought Ben Watson back, right? Ben Watson was 38 when they brought him back, and I wasn't sure what you could get out of him. Yeah. He caught 35 passes, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think if you're looking at Jimmy Graham and that's the type of production that's like, okay, can he be a red zone weapon? Can he catch 4 or 5 touchdowns and be a unguardable player in parts of the field? I just think like it's going to be intriguing. But yes, I got to talk to Taysom today, and he's talking about his role, and he's talking about how he wants to focus on this. He wants to focus on this. He actually said like he's a guy who really would love structure. He's a structure guy. And every day he comes to Saints practice, and it's just the least structured thing you could possibly imagine.
It's chaos, right?
But I kind of just asked him straight up. It was like, do you consider yourself a tight end? Like on the depth chart, on the roster, you are listed at tight end. But what do you think you are? And this is what he had to say.
I don't know. I mean, I don't think of myself as a tight end. I don't think I had a single rep last year as an inline tight end. So when I think of a tight end, that's kind of what hits my head. I don't know how I would label myself.
No one else does.
Yeah. I don't know. Obviously, my background is being quarterback. So when I think about what I've done throughout my career, I think of that. As far as what I'm doing this year, I don't know.
So, in summary, absolutely not. Taysom Hill does not consider himself a tight end, just like everyone else. There really should be just a separate position on the roster.
And just right, utility or whatever.
Yeah, call it what you want. And it's like there's going to be a point this offseason when someone's like, "Wow, I can't believe the Saints kept 4 tight ends." They didn't. They kept 3 and Taysom. Because that's the only thing. But I just think it's funny. Like, not even he's willing to go up there and be like, yeah, I'm a tight end.
But deep down, he really definitely still thinks of himself as a quarterback.
I could see it in his eyes. And I will give him credit. I think he has, over the last 2 seasons specifically, really embraced this role in ways that in the last season with Sean, when he was competing with Jameis, he had not yet. And I think it was really kind of a disappointment for him to compete for the job, lose it, and then have to figure it out the rest of the way. but I think that he is a team guy. He wants to win. He wants the team to succeed, and he wants to do whatever he can to help them. And I think last year you really saw it, and he blossomed in that role. He scored all those touchdowns. He kind of found a niche that made sense, and his role developed in, it's like you look at it, it's kind of like a tree where the roots are kind of spreading, right? And it just, you kind of feel like, wow, this is where he can really contribute. And there were games last year, week 5 against the Seahawks, week 16 against the Browns. They lose those games if he is not in the role that he is in. Now, maybe if he was the starter, who knows? But in the way the offense was running, if you were not utilizing Taysom Hill in the ways you were, you lose those games. And how, there's only so many guys in a team that you can point to and say that about, right? Like offensive linemen, whatever, you can point to and say, we need them, obviously, receivers, whatever. It's hard to find guys who you can say, no, we won this game because of what he did. And if he didn't do that, we lose them. And that's what Taysom is. And so when you're looking for value, you're looking for a guy that is willing to do anything, it's him. And I really do appreciate him a lot.
No, and like you said, just everywhere he is, he's giving it that extra effort, always striving to get that extra yardage, or still one of my favorite plays from him was, I think it was either 2019 or 2020, that block punt in Tampa Bay that he had, and it just shows you, the guy's willing to do anything to help this team win, like you mentioned. And even though you can tell, you saw in the depth of his soul when you looked in his eyes, like he still wants to be that quarterback, but it's like, in order to be that quarterback, I got to do a bunch of other stuff, and he's okay with it.
Yeah, and I also asked him, what he worked on this offseason, and this is what he had to say.
I think it's kind of what we talked about, route running. And I think the other thing is like film study is being able to make those decisions quickly, right? It's one thing to get a ball and take a drop and have an expectation of what somebody's going to do, what breaks they're going to make based on the coverage. But now, I'm hoping to get more opportunities to run some of those routes. And so that was new for me, and that was an emphasis this year as far as my training goes. But I try not to get too specific with my off-season training. I make sure that I feel strong, and I make sure I'm in shape and I can run fast, because the scope of what I'm doing, it's hard to just become so specialized on one thing. So I try to make sure that I'm well-rounded.
Yeah, so he can't just practice one thing. And when I asked him, like, what specifically have you worked on this offseason that you feel like, oh, I need to get better at this? And he can't pinpoint one thing, because there's so many things. And I do find it kind of fascinating to think about. It's like, how do you set up an off-season program when it's like, you can't possibly narrow it down?
No, you just have like, you pretty much have to be an expert and master at everything.
Yes. And, just to kind of loop back around here, here's what Taysom said about Jimmy Graham when he was asked, because, Jimmy Graham is kind of a ethereal figure for these guys. Like, I don't know if there was anyone on this team other than Cam Jordan who was around when Jimmy was. I think he's probably the only player who can look back and say, yeah, I was a teammate of Jimmy Graham. And that's kind of fascinating to think about, because he's still around. He's still playing. But all the other players on this roster are like, oh, yeah, I remember watching Jimmy Graham as a member of the Saints and being like, how do you guard that guy? And now he's here. So here's what Taysom had to say about it.
Man, I know Jimmy's a great player. I feel like through the years and my time here, we would often bring up Jimmy of how he would run his routes. And so, conversations with Drew, it's like, oh, Jimmy used to do this, or on this route he would do this. And so his name was always coming up, and we'd pull up old film and watch his stuff. So, and obviously played him a couple of times when he was up in Chicago and whatnot. So I've been following his career. I've seen what he's done. And now to have the opportunity to play with him is super positive. There's a guy that's just had a ton of experience. There's just so much wisdom that comes from experience and reps, and he checks all those boxes. And he's been great to work with the last couple of days. It's been really fun to have him around, and ask him questions and have him in the room.
And here's what Derek Carr had to say about his new 6'7" tight end.
Besides the resume and the leadership and you know who he is in the locker room, he's a great guy. You know, Jimmy was one of the guys Devontae would always talk about. You know, that he just loved him as a person, loved him as a teammate, and I didn't even know Jimmy then. You know, and then when we signed him, you know, the very first thing is Jimmy was talking about how much he loved Devontae. So I was like, okay, it's mutual. They like each other. You know, and so that was my only impression that I had of him from afar. And then yesterday we sat there and talked for 30 minutes. And, you know, we talked about, you know, Drew, Aaron, Seattle. We talked about a whole bunch of different stuff. And, you know, I had questions for him and, you know, all that stuff, especially as a pilot too, you know, flying around and stuff like that. So we were just getting to know him, you know, what makes him tick. But when you get around him, you're like, you would just want him in the locker room, you know. His leadership to that tight end room, leadership to everyone on the offense. He's the first guy, hey, if you need anything said, you tell me and I'll say it. You know, that like he's that kind of guy. And so he reminds me a lot in that aspect of Lee Smith, was that kind of leader. I played with Lee in Oakland, and he was that kind of leader. Whatever you need, I got it. And, you know, when you have a guy that has your back like that, it always feels good.
So when he's talking about Devontae, he's talking about Devontae Adams, who Derek Carr played with in in Las Vegas last year. And so Jimmy Graham played for the Packers for a couple seasons, and he was teammates with Devontae Adams. So that's where they crossed paths, and that's when Derek Carr had talked to Devontae Adams, who gave Jimmy Graham a glowing review, and Jimmy Graham then reciprocated that, saying, "Oh, I love Devontae." So that's what he's talking about there. He also mentioned that Jimmy Graham's a pilot, which, I mean, he must have the plane must have like an extra big cockpit to like accommodate a 6'7" pilot. But yeah, I think it's not a coincidence that people love playing with Jimmy Graham. Like it makes it a lot easier to bring in a veteran player who you're still trying to figure out exactly what he can do when that player is as well liked and well respected as Jimmy Graham is.
I thought it was telling too the other day, the initial press conferences when training camp opened, hearing from even Mickey Loomis, a general manager, executive vice president of the team, and talking about the attitude that that Graham brings to the locker room, to the team, and I just never, I don't know, I felt he was a flashy player, but I never saw him as really that kind of vocal, badass, trash talking kind of tight end. And it seemed at least that kind of way that the attitude that Mickey Loomis was talking about kind of made me feel like he is that guy.
Yeah, and I think just part of that is just playing however many 15 seasons in the NFL. I mean, you gain an understanding. Like Mickey talked about how, the maturity level that he had when he was a young player here is a lot different than what he has now, and that's part of the reason you bring in veteran players. That's part of the reason he's an attractive fit. It's why the Saints have looked at him, and especially in a tight end room that has a lot of young guys, right? Foster Moreau is 25, 26. Like Jawan Johnson's in that range too. Like these are young, impressionable guys. Now they have a veteran to look up to, because it's tough. It's tough to learn how to be an NFL player and also be leading younger players, right? Like Cam Jordan has made that a science. He's made it an art form. It's not as easy as it looks. And, now I think that takes some of the pressure off a guy like Jawan, who can now kind of lean on someone who's done it before. As he's still learning. Like it takes more than 2 years to learn how to play tight end in the NFL. And so now he's got Jimmy. I think it's a good addition. I still think there's maybe a 50-50 shot that he makes the roster. Let's be real. He is 36. I don't know how much he has left to give. But it's still going to be fun to watch. And, that's all you can ask for as a fan of an NFL team, right? Just want to have a good time.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm more confident in him making the roster just because of the quote unquote skins on the wall that he has. And I guess, time will tell if he really is still in football kind of shape. I'm just curious, though, what should we really expect from Graham if he can play a 17-game season? Because obviously he's not going to be that 11, 12 touchdown a season guy.
Well, let's say 50-50 is a heck of a lot better odds than I'd give most, if not all, other 36-year-old players who showed up ready for another season of football, right? So those are pretty good odds, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think he's going to have to show in games in the preseason what he has left, and that's when I put that at. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I think look at Ben Watson, what he was able to do in that age 38 season. The Saints brought him back. He did play in all 16 games. He got 35 passes, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think the touchdown total should be higher. The yardage total, I think that's about fair. And you're not going to be expecting a ton out of him. You might get a couple starts if you need them. The only thing that makes this situation kind of odd to me is you would think your depth tight end would be a top end blocker, right?
Well, we know that's not the case.
And that's just never been his thing. Like it's just not. And it's like, I don't think that's insulting to him. It's just never been his forte. So how does he get on the field if without taking Jawan off the field, right? Because he's not going to take Jawan's job. So is he kind of just insurance if Jawan gets hurt, or I don't know. So that's going to be something we have to kind of decide. But until we see him do something in a real, even in one of these joint practices, I'm not gonna jump over a barrel to be like, wow, he's that guy. But for now, we haven't even talked to him yet. I am looking forward to talking to him hopefully later this week. But either way, it's a fun story to start camp, and we'll see where it goes. We're going to have a lot more kind of intriguing stuff coming in. We have fans out there on Friday, as mentioned. We're going to get to talk to a lot of these other guys. We'll have a lot of audio to throw at you. So, maybe even enough for an extra episode here or there. But for now, we're going to stick to the normal 2 episodes a week. So the next one we'll probably record over the weekend and get to you on Monday. But who knows? Maybe there'll be an emergency podcast here or there. We'll figure it out. Either way, thanks everyone for listening. This has been Inside Black and Gold, reacting to the first day of Saints training camp. We got the second day tomorrow. We got the third day on Friday. We got the fourth day on Saturday. And then we got a day off. And before I go, one of the things that interested me is you look at the schedule, and DA mentioned this, is they've adjusted their schedule a bit to kind of be forward thinking in terms of health and avoiding injuries. And if you look at the schedule, there are only like 2 or 3 stretches where they even go 4 practices in a row without a day off or a walkthrough. And I think that was intentional. And I'm happy about it, because that 10-day stretch to start camp where you don't even get a day off is brutal. Just to go out there and watch it every day. I can't imagine.
You start all bright-eyed, and then by, like you said, 4 or 5 days, you're starting to get worn down by it.
Yeah. So I think that's interesting, because Sunday they're off. And I don't recall the last several years them having a day off 4 days after the start of camp. I think that's one of those adjustments that you're seeing. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's a sign that DA is coming out of his shell a little bit in terms of.
And that's why I think Monday is going to be great too, just because they're coming back rested, and boom, they're in pads then. So it should be really aggressive.
Pad day, baby.
Yeah.
All right. This is Inside Black and Gold. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review wherever you get your podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, the Odyssey app. Download the Odyssey app. Why not? Just try it. Just do it. Do it. Do it. Do it.
I hope to see some of our fans at camp, honestly.
Yeah. If you're out at camp, say
Definitely
hi.
Say hey, please.
You know what he looked like. I'm the one sweating through my shirt. Actually, that's everybody. I've already made that joke. All right. Follow me on Twitter at Jeff_Nowak. Follow the show at Saints_pod. Don't follow the Saints Pod. Well, I guess you could also do that, but that's not ours. And you can follow Steve at Steve Giller, WWL. Steve's got to run and go get on Sports Talk with the old gang, the old boys over there. And Steve, any parting words before we get on out of here?
No, just so excited for this football season, and I don't know. I can't remember how I started it. My first season was the Super Bowl year, so been doing this a little bit now, and it just never gets old covering an NFL team. Feel blessed to do it, and love this part of the job for sure.
No doubt. And we love all of you.
Absolutely.
That's why we do it. But all right. Be easy, y'all. Peace.
Later.